ATVs can be hazardous to operate. Polaris ATVs are not to be ridden by anyone under age 18. For your safety, always wear a helmet, eye protection, and other protective clothing. Be particularly careful on difficult terrain. Polaris recommends that all ATV riders take a training course. For safety and training information, see your Polaris dealer or call Polaris at 1-800-342-3764.
These days, some companies are doing a lot of shouting about the new features on their ATVs. But the fact is, some of those so-called new features have been on Polaris ATVs for over 10 years. So while the competition may be catching on, they're far from catching up. In 1985, Polaris introduced the first ATV made in America. It was unlike anything else on the trail and revolutionized the industry. It was the first ATV with automatic transmission, the first with floorboards, the first with single lever braking, and that was just the beginning. Over the years, the list of Polaris firsts grew and grew. Many features have been Polaris exclusives for over a decade, giving Polaris a reputation as the ATV innovation leader, the company that gives riders all the latest and greatest ideas in power, performance, handling, comfort, durability, and reliability. Like we said, feature after feature, while the competition may be catching on, they're far from catching up. For the next few minutes, we're going to take a close look at the Polaris Sportsman 500 and the Yamaha Grizzly, two of the largest ATVs on the market. Which one's better? We'll compare them in these areas. Listen to the facts and you decide. In tests comparing the Sportsman 500 with the Yamaha Grizzly, the first thing we discovered was that when it comes to engine power, 600 is not always greater than 500. The Grizzly engine does have more displacement, but it's air-cooled, so it can't manage the heat or maximize the power like the premium liquid-cooled design of the Sportsman 500. In fact, the Sportsman 500 delivers slightly more horsepower. In this case, 500 is greater than 600. In engine power, we'll call it even. Now, how do both machines perform? We put them in head-to-head tests, and here's what we found out. You'd expect a 600 to outpull a 500, right? Wrong. Tied tail to tail, it was a draw. Radar runs? In acceleration and top speed, as our research shows, it's still a draw. Next, we put both ATVs to a tougher test. We hooked them up to a weight transfer sled. The Grizzly growled. But the Sportsman 500 pulled harder and farther, over 20% farther. In overall pulling power, score 1 for the Sportsman 500. Ever had your truck or car stuck? One wheel holds and the other one spins? Well, that's exactly what happens with ATVs that use a limited slip front differential. The Grizzly is one of them. In a tough situation, its limited slip front differential sends more power to the wheel without traction and goes nowhere. You could call it a 3.5-wheel drive. And look at this. When the Grizzly's hung up, you can't push down the rear brake. making it impossible to shift into reverse. The Sportsman 500 and all Polaris 4x4s use an intelligent four-wheel drive system. When the rear wheels lose traction, it instantly and automatically engages both front wheels and pulls you through. Score another one for the Sportsman 500. Both the Sportsman 500 and the Grizzly feature McPherson strut independent front suspension with virtually identical amounts of travel. But look closer. In this test, it's easy to see that the Sportsman 500's turning radius is tighter than the Grizzly's. Which means in tough spots and on tight trails, the Sportsman 500 can turn sharper and keep going, while the Grizzly must go through all these steps just to make the turn. Stop, step on rear brake, shift into reverse, back up, step on rear brake, shift into forward, go. Another strike against the Grizzly and another big plus for the Sportsman 500. Now for the rear suspension. The Grizzly uses a straight axle and single shock swing arm with 7.5 inches of travel. The Sportsman 500 features independent rear suspension with 9.5 inches of vertical rear wheel travel, dual progressive rate shocks, and a stabilizing anti-roll bar. As you can see, over rough terrain, the difference is dramatic. The Grizzly must jump over obstacles in its way, lifting both wheels off the ground and losing traction. The Sportsman 500's independent rear suspension and greater travel give it superior traction and a softer ride. That's a big difference and a major advantage of the Sportsman 500. Independent rear suspension and more travel give the Sportsman 500 another big benefit: greater ground clearance. The Sportsman 500 has an industry-leading 11 inches of ground clearance. The Grizzly? At its lowest point, it has just over 7 inches of ground clearance. Good thing that wasn't a rock. By the way, the skid protection on the Sportsman 500 is also superior to the Grizzly, especially under the engine. Any way you slice it, the Sportsman 500 wins here. In 1996, Polaris was the first ATV company to introduce engine braking with an automatic transmission. Unlike the Grizzly, the Sportsman's engine braking system is dual sensing for both torque and engine RPM, providing superior backshifting and cooler running. One more for the Sportsman 500. In engine power, pulling power, four-wheel drive, turning radius, rear suspension, and other comparisons, there is no comparison. And the list goes on and on. The Sportsman 500 outpulls, outrides, and outperforms the Grizzly. Those are the bare facts. The Sportsman 500 by Polaris. It's the best there is.
I sold this round baler to one of my best customers just a few days ago. He's an excellent, excellent farmer. He likes to do things well. And one of the first things he told me was that he'd just seen his neighbor making some strange-looking round bales. Well, I had to smile. You see, it's possible to operate a New Holland baler a little on the sloppy side and still get a bale. It's a funny-looking bale, but a bale. With our competition, if you don't do it just right, you don't get a bale. That's because we have a more forgiving machine. Up to a point, it forgives operator error. Now, what I told him was it's just as easy to make a good-looking round bale as it is to make one that's soft on the ends. Basically, there are only 4 things to remember. You need to have the baler set up properly, you need the right kind of windrow, you need to watch your driving techniques, and you need to read your operator's manual. Everything you need to know is covered in this manual. You should read it word for word, cover to cover. Now, what I'm going to tell you is just a supplement to the operator's manual, and not a substitute for it. Before we deliver any new baler, we make a few pre-delivery checks. We check the bale size indicator, the full bale alarm, the overfill protection. We adjust the pickup. We check the bale command micro switches, the twine tubes, and the cutoff system. The first thing we want to do is simulate a full bale in the chamber. To do this, place a 2-inch spacer here on the main frame. And then let the air out of the air springs. As the air springs deflate, this arm moves into the full bale position. When the arm